She said it again over dinner. Right there, in front of the whole family. You've always been the difficult one. Why can't you be more like your brother? He's the one who stuck by us. My fork stayed still. The mashed potatoes turned cold on my plate. 30 years of swallowing words rose in my throat. But I didn't raise my voice, didn't defend myself. I just reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the old recorder, the one she gave me when I was 16, back when she still believed I had something worth saying. I set it on the table, clicked it once. Her voice crackled through the speakers, soft and sharp. I know your brother hurt you, but I can't protect you from him. Some people just are who they are. The room froze. Forks paused midair. Chairs shifted back. No one looked at her. Not yet. She blinked, tried to smile. Where'd you find that old thing? I looked her in the eye. Steady. You left it in the attic, with the rest of what you didn't want to remember. My brother laughed. Short, dismissive. That's ancient history. You're still clinging to childhood scars like some victim. I didn't flinch. They only stayed scars because you kept picking at them. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hesitate. She opened her mouth to defend him. I saw it coming. But for the first time, I didn't wait for the excuses. You told me back then that protecting him was easier than facing what he did. You made your choice. I just finally decided to stop agreeing with it. Her hands trembled slightly on the edge of the table. Age had softened her grip, but not her denial. That's not how I remember it, she whispered. I leaned forward, voice low but clear. Then maybe it's time you listen to yourself for once. I pressed play again. Her voice filled the room. Soft, sad, true. I don't know how to stop him, so I need you to be stronger. To endure it. Silence. No rebuttal. No revision. Just the raw truth. She tried to forget. I turned off the recorder and slid it to the center of the table. I'll leave this here. You can play it again when you're ready to stop pretending. Then I stood, left the dinner unfinished. And for the first time in 30 years, I walked out without asking if they needed anything else from me. I left the recorder on the table. But when I got home, the weight of what I hadn't said still followed me through the door. I pulled out the box from the hall closet, the one labeled high school junk in faded Sharpie. Inside, cassette tapes, old notebooks, half a Walkman, and a stack of letters she never mailed. I dug through them until my fingers found what I didn't know I was looking for. A second tape, labeled in her handwriting, "Private, don't erase." I slipped it into the player, heart steady but slow. Her voice filled the room again, softer this time, not speaking to me, speaking for herself. I know what John's doing. I know it's wrong. But if I confront him, I'll lose them both. And I can't stand the thought of being alone. She wasn't protecting him. She was protecting herself from the loneliness of facing what she had allowed. For 30 years, I thought it was about choosing him over me. But maybe it was about choosing anyone over facing herself. I sat back on the couch, letting the words echo through the quiet. How many fights had I blamed myself for losing when the referee never showed up in the first place? I rewound the tape, played it again. Same words, same pain. But now, they didn't feel like a dagger in my chest. They felt like proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that the silence wasn't my failure to speak, but her refusal to hear. I let the tape stop on its own. No rush to end it. No rush to fix it. Sometimes the truth just needs room to breathe before it breaks the surface. Tomorrow, I decide whether to bring the second tape to her. But tonight, I let it sit in the quiet with me. A different kind of company. Caleb showed up around noon, unannounced. Dropped his backpack by the door like he always did. Boots scuffed from last night's bar shift. Headphones around his neck. Tuned to a world where none of this mattered. Mom said you stirred things up last night. His voice was flat, more curious than angry. I kept my eyes on the tape recorder. Guess she told your version. He shrugged. It's the only one she usually gives. I rewound the second tape. Let the whir of the wheels fill the silence between us. Caleb leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You really still listening to that old thing? What's the point? They're never going to change. That hit harder than I let show. I paused the tape. The point isn't to change them. It's to stop letting them rewrite what happened. He gave me a long look. Not angry. Not dismissive. Just tired. You've been holding on to this your whole life, huh? I nodded. Yeah. And for a while, I thought if I held it long enough, it'd stop hurting. Did it? No. He sat across from me, still keeping his distance, like he was standing on the edge of something too deep to cross just yet. So what do you want now? Revenge? Closure? I thought about it, shook my head. Just a little truth in the room, even if it's only playing on a broken tape player. He smirked dry. You're weird, Dad. But his eyes softened. The first crack in his armor. He tapped the recorder lightly. You ever gonna let me hear what's on there? Maybe, when you're ready to know where you come from, not just where you're going. He stood, grabbing a soda from the fridge. Guess we'll see. Then paused at the door. For what it's worth, Uncle John's a jerk. Always has been. You didn't make that up. He left without waiting for an answer, but his words stayed behind. Maybe I wasn't carrying this alone anymore. Not yet an ally, but maybe a witness. And sometimes that's the first step. The house was still after Caleb left. No voices, no footsteps, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint click of the tape rewinding again. I didn't press play this time. Just sat there staring at it, feeling how small it looked on the kitchen table. After all these years, thinking it held everything that broke me. Turns out, it wasn't the tape I was afraid of. It was what came after the truth was spoken out loud. The quiet. The question of whether anyone would stay after hearing it. For 30 years, I thought holding my pain made me strong. Like if I didn't cry, if I didn't speak, it meant I had control. But silence wasn't strength. It was survival. And I was tired of surviving. I whispered it into the empty room. Words so soft they barely made it past my lips. I didn't want you to love me less. I just wanted you to notice I was still there. It wasn't for Mom, or John, or Caleb. It was for the boy who sat in this kitchen 30 years ago, hearing his mother tell him to be stronger, because she couldn't bear to lose anything else. I closed my eyes. Let that truth sit beside me. No fixing it. No erasing it. Just letting it breathe for the first time. Maybe I couldn't rewrite the past, but I didn't have to carry its silence anymore. The tape recorder sat quiet, waiting, and for the first time, I didn't feel like its keeper. I felt like its witness. Tomorrow, I decide whether to play that second tape for her, whether to let the truth land in the open, or leave it buried where we all pretended it didn't exist. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like rest. The next morning, I opened the box again. This time, I wasn't searching for ghosts. I was searching for facts. Buried beneath the tapes and high school notebooks was a faded leather-bound journal. Mom's handwriting filled the margins. Slanted, precise, familiar. I flipped through the pages. Shopping lists, scripture quotes, birthdays circled and crossed out. And then, tucked between March and May, beneath a grocery list for frozen peas and toothpaste. March 12th, John hit Marcus again. Said it was a joke. I laughed along, because I didn't know how to stop him. I hate myself for it. The words didn't knock the wind out of me. They didn't surprise me. They confirmed what I already knew. I read them twice. 3 times. Not looking for something else. Just letting them finally exist in daylight. She knew. She knew the whole time. And every Sunday dinner, every birthday call, every forced smile over the years had been layered over the single admission. She didn't protect him because she was blind. She protected him because she was scared. And in that fear, she left me alone. I closed the journal slowly. No slamming. No throwing across the room. You don't rage at a truth that's been sleeping in your house for decades. You just decide whether you'll let it keep sleeping. The recorder sat beside the journal. 2 voices from the past. One spoken, one written. Both undeniable now. I slipped the journal into my bag. No plans for it yet. Just the knowledge that tomorrow's confrontation, would no longer be one man's word against another's. It would be her words against her silence. The kitchen clock ticked on. No drama, no storm, just a steady beat of time catching up to the truth. And I sat with it, not as a victim, but as the only person in this family, finally willing to look in the eye. I thought about the first time I knew I was alone in that house. I was 9. John was 12. It was a night he shoved me down the stairs. Not far, just enough to bruise my ribs and knock the wind out of me. I lay there for a minute, chest tight, trying to decide if crying made me weak or honest. When I finally stood, Mom was already halfway down the hall. John said it first. He tripped. I tried to catch him. She looked at him, then at me, and in that moment, I learned what stories families choose to believe. She smiled, thin and tired. Accidents happen. Be more careful next time, Marcus. Then she kissed John on the head and walked away. I sat on the stairs long after they left, trying to understand how the person who told me to be kind had just walked away from kindness herself. Years passed like that. Me slipping, him laughing, her pretending the floor was always slick and never pushed. And every time I thought about leaving, I'd picture her standing alone in that kitchen, counting the absence of 2 sons instead of 1. And I stayed, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't want her to feel what I felt on those stairs. That's the trap abuse sets for you. It makes you think your pain is protecting someone else's peace. But now, with her words written in that journal, I realized peace was never what she was protecting. It was comfort, the kind of comfort that keeps secrets buried and bruises quiet. I ran a hand over my ribs. Old ache, still there sometimes on cold mornings. Not as a wound, as a reminder. The past didn't need rewriting. It just needed naming. And maybe after 30 years, I was finally ready to say it out loud. Not to hurt her, but to stop hurting myself. Caleb came by that night. No announcement, no pretense. Just dropped his keys on the counter and leaned against the fridge. Mom called. She's confused. Thinks you're digging up stuff that doesn't need to be aired. I nodded. That's her way. Confusion's easier than guilt. He crossed his arms, frowning. What do you want out of this, Dad? An apology? A confession? I sat at the table, the journal beside the recorder, looked him in the eye for the first time in too long. I used to think I wanted her to admit she chose him over me, that if she said out loud, I'd stop feeling like I was 10 years old again, waiting for someone to pick me second. He said nothing, just listened. But that's not it anymore. I tapped the journal lightly. What I want is to stop living like I still need her to love me for it to count. That hit something deep in him. I saw in the way his shoulders shifted, just slightly. All my life, I thought silence made me strong. That if I didn't ask for love, I couldn't be disappointed by who gave it. I let out a slow breath. Turns out silence just makes you lonely, even in a full house. Caleb sat down across from me. Quiet now, not judging, just present. I never wanted you to carry that, I said. Didn't stop me from feeling it. We sat there, 2 men born from the same fracture, trying to build something solid out of broken pieces. He looked at the recorder. You gonna play that for her? I nodded once. Yeah, not for revenge. For clarity. He gave a small, tired smile. Think she'll finally hear it? Doesn't matter. I'll hear myself. That's enough. For a while, we said nothing more. The kitchen felt lighter somehow. Not fixed, but less crowded with what we weren't saying. Maybe that was the first real inheritance I had to give him. The courage to name the silence, instead of pass it down. I called Ruth the next morning. She answered on the second ring, her voice calm, steady, just like when I was a kid. Marcus Carter. Haven't heard from you in a while. Didn't think you want to. She laughed softly. I always knew you'd call when you were ready. What's going on? I told her everything. The tapes, the journal, the confrontation, and the part of me still wondering if I'd imagined all of it. She didn't interrupt, didn't rush to comfort, just listened, like she always did. When I finished, there was a long pause. Then she spoke, quiet but firm. I remember your mother calling me once, years ago, crying, saying she was afraid of what John was turning into. She never told me that. She wouldn't, because after she cried, she laughed, said she was overreacting, said boys will be boys. The words cut clean, not because they hurt, but because they fit exactly where the silence had been. I offered to help, Ruth said. Offered counseling, mediation, anything, but she said it would make things worse. I let that sink in. So instead, she let it stay exactly the same. Ruth exhaled softly. Sometimes people protect their version of family more than they protect the people in it. I closed my eyes. Let the truth settle without fighting it. Would you tell her that if I asked you to? She paused. I would, but Marcus, she already knows. She's just spent 30 years trying to forget it. I nodded, quiet. Then maybe it's time she remembers. Ruth's voice softened. If you need me to stand beside you when you play that tape, you call. You shouldn't have to be alone in the room where you were hurt. I smiled. Small, honest. Thank you. For the first time in days. The air felt a little less heavy. The truth wasn't just mine anymore. It had a witness. That afternoon, I found Caleb sitting on the back steps, shoes muddy, phone in his lap, earbuds resting silent around his neck. I sat beside him, the old tape recorder in my hands. Worn, scuffed, the kind of object that outlives the stories it holds. For a while, we just sat there, watching the wind bend the oak trees out back. Then I set the recorder between us. Didn't push it toward him. Didn't keep it close. Just placed it there. I want you to decide what happens next. He glanced at it. Didn't touch it. Why me? Because this can't just be my fight anymore. And maybe the next chapter sounds better in a younger voice. He gave a small, skeptical smile. I'm not a hero in this story, Dad. Neither am I. But maybe we can stop being the victims, too. He stared at the recorder. Silent. Thinking. Finally, he picked it up. Turned it over in his hands. Checked the batteries like it was just any other piece of tech. But it wasn't. Not to me. And not, I think, to him anymore. So what are you saying? He asked. I'm saying you decide whether it plays again in front of her. Or whether we let her sit in the silence she created. He sat with that for a while. Then tucked the recorder into his jacket pocket. Didn't promise anything. Didn't announce a plan. But action speaks louder than intention. He stood, brushing dirt from his jeans. Dinner's at 7. You coming? I smiled, tired but sure. I'll be there. Not sure who else will be ready. He gave me a small nod. The kind that says we aren't done. But we aren't alone anymore. As he walked back inside, the door closed softly behind him. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the only one carrying this story. The recorder was out of my hands now. And maybe that's where it always belonged. Dinner started the way it always did. Mom set the table like she was building a stage. John cracked jokes no one laughed at, but everyone pretended to. I sat there quiet, waiting, not for my moment, for his. Caleb cleared his throat halfway through the meal. All eyes turned to him. Surprised, curious. He pulled the tape recorder from his jacket and set it on the table between the mashed potatoes and the guilt. I think it's time everyone heard the part of the story that never made it to Grace. Mom froze. John scoffed. Oh, great. Another pity parade. You really gonna drag this out in front of dinner? Caleb didn't flinch. You've been dragging it out for 30 years. I'm just pressing play. He clicked the button. The room filled with her voice. Soft. Cracked. True. March 12th, John hit Marcus again. Said it was a joke. I laughed along because I didn't know how to stop him. I hate myself for it. The room fell still. Knives paused mid-cut. Chewing stopped halfway. Even the clock seemed to hold its breath. Mom's hands trembled in her lap. John shifted, suddenly too big for his chair. Where did you find that? She whispered. Caleb's voice stayed calm. In the place where all your silence lives. He looked at her then, not angry, just tired of pretending. You don't get to rewrite who Dad is anymore. Not while I'm sitting at this table. I watched him from across the table. Not as my son, but as the man I didn't know he'd become. John stood abruptly. You're going to believe a dusty old tape over your own family? Caleb met his stare. I am, because this is the first time someone told the truth at this table. John grabbed his coat and stormed out. No one followed. Not this time. Caleb turned off the tape, sat down, picked up his fork like it was just another Tuesday night. No applause, no victory, just truth sitting between us, finally spoken out loud. And for the first time in 30 years, the silence didn't win. After dinner, we sat at the kitchen table, the recorder between us like a spent match. The room was quiet now, not peaceful, but quiet in a way that felt earned. Caleb tapped the table lightly. What happens next? I sipped my coffee. John won't take this quietly. He'll spin it. Say we edited the tape, that you're manipulated. It'll be my word against his. Again. Caleb leaned back. Let him. At least this time, the whole family heard it. I smiled, small but honest. He'll call Aunt Sharon, Uncle Paul, try to circle the wagons. Caleb's voice stayed steady. Then we circle ours. He pulled out his phone. I'll send the recording to the rest of the family. No commentary. Just the truth, straight from the source. I nodded. Simple, direct, clean. Ruth said she's willing to back us up if it comes to that. She remembered when Mom first admitted it. Caleb paused. You sure you want this out there? Not just kept between us. I thought about it. The years of silence. The ache of wondering if anyone else saw what I carried. Yeah, it's not about protecting my pride anymore. It's about stopping the lie before it's passed down again. He smiled faintly. Good. Then we're on the same page. He hit send. A quiet act of rebellion in a family that worshipped appearances. I looked out the kitchen window. The porch light buzzed against the night. Empty chairs sat on the lawn where we used to play catch. Ghosts in their seats, watching the story finally break its loop. Tomorrow, the calls would come. John would rage. Mom would cry. Some cousins would stay silent, not because they didn't believe us, but because speaking up costs more than they're willing to pay. But for once, I wasn't paying alone. I stood, stretched, and flipped the recorder off. Its job was done. We'll get some sleep tonight, I said. Caleb grinned. Yeah, we've earned that much. And for the first time in 30 years, the night didn't feel like something we had to survive. It felt like something we finally won. The next morning, the calls started. Uncle Paul first, then Aunt Sharon, then two cousins I hadn't heard from in years, all asking the same question, wrapped in different voices. Is the tape real? Why now? Do we really have to dig this up again? John, of course, wasted no time. By noon, he'd emailed the entire family, calling a family council for Sunday afternoon. His words were polished, rehearsed, to discuss the slander and restore unity. Unity. Funny how people call for peace after they fired the first shot. I paced the kitchen while Caleb scrolled through the family thread. He's fast, Caleb said, calm as always. He knows speed builds doubt. If he controls the first reaction, the truth looks like noise. Caleb put down his phone. So, what do we do? I exhaled. Show up. Stay steady. Let them sit with the tape instead of his version of it. But I felt it. The hours slipping away. Sunday coming like a slow-moving storm. If we lost the room Sunday, they'd bury this again. Not because they didn't believe it, but because believing it would mean admitting they ignored it for 30 years. I poured coffee with a hand steadier than I felt. We've got 2 days. He'll call them one by one. Remind them of family loyalty, birthdays, old favors. Caleb leaned back. And what are we supposed to remind them of? I smiled faintly. The part of the family that's been bruised quiet for 3 decades. He nodded, small but sure. Guess we better speak louder than their comfort zones. We spend the rest of the day reaching out, not fighting, just reminding them this isn't about a grudge. It's about a truth we all felt but never named. Some responded with silence, some with clipped politeness. A few, surprisingly, said, "It's about time." But Sunday still waited, and so did John. The clock ticked steady to a room that had never heard the truth spoken all at once. And I wondered, when the moment came, would they cover their ears or finally listen? Sunday afternoon came fast and slow. The house filled with voices that hadn't shared the same roof in years. Some louder, some quieter, all waiting for someone else to go first. Mom sat at the head of the living room, tired but upright. John paced by the fireplace, rehearsing charm between clenched teeth. Caleb and I stood near the doorway, neither inside nor outside the circle. John spoke first. Smooth, polished, practiced. Let's be clear, this tape is ancient. It's being twisted to hurt this family, not help it. Marcus has always had a difficult memory of the past. Laughter from a cousin in the corner. Tight, awkward. I let the silence stretch before I spoke. Not to John, to Mom. Do you remember what you told me when I was 16? She looked confused. Small. I've told you many things, Marcus. I nodded, steady. You told me. Sometimes it's easier to keep the peace than face the pain. The room shifted. Small words. Big weight. I took a breath. I've spent 30 years holding that peace for you, and it didn't heal a thing. It just let the hurt sit longer. John scoffed. So this is your therapy session now? I met his eyes, calm. No, John. This is where I stop carrying your silence for you. The phrase landed. Quiet but firm. I turned back to Mom. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking for honesty, even if it hurts. She looked down at her hands. Didn't cry. Didn't deny. Just quiet. For the first time in years. That quiet didn't feel like victory or defeat. It felt like space. John shifted, less certain now. The room wasn't laughing anymore. I repeated it once more, softer now. Easier to keep the peace than face the pain. Then let it hang there. Let them sit with it. No yelling. No winning. Just the truth. Spoken out loud. And left in the open. And sometimes that's enough. The room stayed still after I spoke. John didn't fill the silence. For once, Mom sat there, hands folded, gaze low. I took a slow breath. No rehearsed speech. No anger waiting behind my ribs. Just the question I never asked when I was 10 or 20 or 45. Why did you believe him instead of me? Her fingers tightened slightly, the way they did when she peeled potatoes too thin. She let out a breath. Because believing you meant I failed you both. And I didn't know how to live with that. There it was. Soft, small, but honest. John scoffed. She did what she could. Get over it, Marcus. I didn't look at him. I will, but not because you told me to. I kept my eyes on her. I'm not here to punish you, but I won't protect the lie anymore. Her voice was quiet, tired. I didn't ask you to protect it. I just didn't know how to fix it. I nodded once. Maybe it's not ours to fix, but it is ours to stop repeating. She looked up then, not defensive, not distant, just present, for the first time in decades. John shifted by the fireplace. No jokes left, no easy exits. This doesn't change anything, he muttered. I finally looked at him. No, but it changes me. And for the first time in 30 years. That was enough. Mom let out a quiet sigh, almost a release. I hear you now. I smiled. Small. Real. That's all I ever wanted. No hugs. No apologies. No perfect ending. Just a quiet space where truth sat between us. And stayed. The room slowly emptied. Aunt Sharon offered a weak smile on her way out. Uncle Paul didn't make eye contact. John left without saying goodbye. Some endings don't need doors slamming to feel final. I stood to leave, gathering the tape recorder and the journal, the weight of them lighter somehow. As I turned to go, Mom spoke. Soft, hesitant. Leave the recorder. I paused, turned back. She gestured toward the end table beside her chair. I think maybe I need to listen to it alone. Not an apology, not forgiveness, but something closer to responsibility. The first crack in 30 years of excuses. I set the recorder down gently, the same way you place a story back where it belongs. Instead of hiding it, she didn't thank me, Didn't promise to change. But she didn't look away. And for now, that was enough. I stepped toward the door, hand on the knob. She spoke again, barely above a whisper. You remind me of your father more than I ever told you. I let that settle. Didn't ask what she meant. Didn't ask why it took 30 years to say it. Some truths arrive late, but they still arrive. I nodded once, steady. Guess we both stayed too quiet for too long. Her lips pressed into a faint smile. Sad. Real. I left the house without the recorder, without the weight, but with something I hadn't expected to find. A little room to breathe. Outside, the sky stretched wide and still, quiet without feeling empty. And for the first time since I was a boy, I didn't leave that house carrying a silence that wasn't mine. The walk to the truck felt different. Not lighter, but clearer, like I finally knew what weight was mine to carry, and what wasn't. I sat in the driver's seat, letting the quiet fill the space Dad's old radio once filled. No music, no noise, just breath and steady hands on the wheel. For years, I thought healing meant fixing what broke. Now I knew better. Sometimes it just means naming what hurt, and letting the rest be unfinished. I watched the house in the rearview mirror. Still standing, still flawed, but no longer a place I feared walking into. And maybe one day, a place I wouldn't have to walk out of feeling small. Caleb texted, "Everything okay?" I smiled faintly. Typed back, "Enough." That's all it needed to be today. I drove slow, windows down, letting the wind carry away the echoes of old arguments. When I pulled into the driveway, the porch light was on. Caleb sitting on the steps, nursing a cup of coffee like it was his guard post. He stood as I got out, searching my face for the answer he was too tired to ask. I gave him a quiet nod. She heard it, didn't erase it. That's a start. He smiled, small and tired. Sometimes that's all you get. I clapped a hand on his shoulder. Sometimes that's enough. We sat there for a while. No plans, no next steps. Just a quiet that finally didn't feel like failure. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for her to love me better. I was standing in the life I'd built when she couldn't, and the peace in that was louder than any apology she never gave. Morning broke soft through the kitchen window. No phone calls, no apologies, no angry voicemail from John. Just quiet, the kind that lingers after the storm leaves but before the earth dries. I poured coffee into the same chipped mug I'd used since college, the one she gave me when I left home the first time, back when I thought leaving meant forgetting. Turns out, leaving just meant carrying it somewhere else. Caleb wandered in, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Any word? I shook my head. None. And maybe that's a word we needed. He sat down across from me. No phone in his hand this time. Just stillness. You think she'll listen to it again? I thought about it. I think she'll stare at it for days before she presses play again. But maybe she'll hear it differently next time. He nodded. What about Uncle John? I smiled faintly. John will find another room to be the loudest voice in. Silence filled the space where plans might have lived. And for once, I didn't try to fill it. The truth had been spoken. What they did with it was no longer mine to manage. I stood, stretched, and looked out the window. The world hadn't changed. Bills still needed paying. Fences still needed fixing. But the story in my chest felt lighter. We still fixing the fence this afternoon? Caleb asked. I smiled. Yeah, nothing like rebuilding something real after breaking something invisible. He grabbed his coat, pulling it on with that quiet resolve that told me he'd carry this story better than I did. Maybe that's all you hope for your kids. Not that they escape the past, but that they carry it softer. The coffee cooled on the counter. The sunlight stretched across the kitchen floor. And for the first time in 30 years, home didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a choice. We spent the afternoon on the south fence line. Same fence John and I helped Dad build when I was about Caleb's age. Back when I thought fixing things was enough to keep them whole. The boards were worn, cracked where winter had split the grain. I handed Caleb the hammer. Your turn. He took it without question, measured the first nail, set it straight before driving it in clean. You and Grandpa built this whole section? He asked. I nodded, and I fixed it alone for the last 20 years. He didn't say anything right away, just hammered the next board in place, then said, quieter, You shouldn't have had to. The words hit harder than I let show, but I smiled through it. Maybe, but now I don't. He finished the last nail, wiped his hands on his jeans, and stepped back. The fence still needed paint. The gate still sagged a little, but it stood, and so did we. He leaned against the post, looking out at the pasture. You think she'll call? I shrugged. One day. Maybe not to fix it, but maybe to stop pretending it was never broken. He nodded, a small, quiet understanding passing between us. I saw myself in him in that moment, not the boy I was, the man I had hoped I'd become, before silence taught me otherwise. He broke the quiet first. We should do the east fence next week, before the rain comes. I smiled. Sounds like a plan. No legacy speech. No dramatic turning point. Just two men rebuilding something, with their hands, instead of their pain. The wind shifted across the field, and for the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for someone else to mend what broke. I was standing beside the one who already started. That evening, I found Caleb on the porch, polishing the same old toolbox Dad left behind. He wasn't rushing, wasn't fixing anything in particular, just keeping it ready. I sat beside him, hands still rough on the fence work. Dad used to sit here like this after a long day. Caleb smiled faintly. Guess some habits make sense after all. The sun dipped low across the pasture. The wind eased. And for once, it didn't feel like it was blowing anything away. I thought back to all the nights I sat in the same spot, waiting for someone else to fix the broken things I couldn't name. And now, without saying it out loud, I saw someone already doing it. You think this place will hold together? He asked. I nodded, slow. If we keep showing up for it. Yeah, it's not the nails or the boards that keep it standing. It's the people who refuse to leave it broken. He closed the toolbox gently, setting it by the door. No fanfare, no closing speech, just quiet purpose. He stood, stretching his back, then turned to me. I'll be up early tomorrow, thinking of clearing the west pasture before it overgrows. I smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't need a response. He paused before going inside. You ever wish you'd left all this behind when you had the chance? I looked out at the field, at the place that held my worst years. And now, finally my best ones. I thought about leaving, but staying taught me how to stop running from myself. He nodded once, then stepped through the door, and in the quiet that followed, I didn't feel like the man left holding a broken family. I felt like the man who stayed long enough to build something better, even if it was only a fence and a quiet porch light. Maybe that's legacy, not the damage they gave you, but the work you choose to leave behind. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen. The house was still, not empty, just resting. The tape recorder was gone now, left behind where it belonged, no longer mine to carry. I poured one last cup of coffee, watching the porch light flicker in the wind. For years, I thought forgiveness looked like a reunion, a clean ending, tied with a bow. Turns out, it looks more like this. Quiet, unfinished, but honest. The past didn't disappear. The pain didn't erase itself. But it stopped running my life the moment I stopped hiding from it. I thought about Mom. Maybe tomorrow she'd play the tape again. Maybe she wouldn't. Either way, I finally stopped waiting for her to rewrite my story. The truth stood where it needed to, out in the open, right where I left it. The porch creaked as Caleb closed up a night. Another day done. Another broken thing made a little stronger. And for once, I didn't feel the need to fix anyone else. If it were your family, would you keep the peace in silence? Or risk the quiet breaking to finally speak the truth?